to the ashes of the Imperium.
Hello and welcome to Ashes of the Imperium. My name is Dan, and once again I'm joined by the wonderful Steve, and today we are talking all about Arks of Omen Abaddon. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, very good, excited.
What are you excited about?
We got a new narrative book, so it's right up our strasser.
Absolutely, and we are big fans of all things narrative on this podcast, and we know that actually it's not just one book, it's not just a narrative book, it's a narrative series. I'm not sure it's a campaign series. I suppose it's more. It seems more of a narrative series that's focused on the events that are happening in the universe rather than anything else. Because we know it's got 4 books, right? We've got so book 1's Abaddon. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got book 2, which is Angron. We've got book 3, which is Vashtorr, who is the new kind of dark mechanicum demonic entity thing.
Cool.
Which we've seen revealed on some of these Warhammer TV things, the Warhammer community reveal shenanigans, whatever we're going to call them. And then a 4th one is an unknown book yet to be revealed. There have been rumours that it might be the return of a Primarch, potentially Lionel Johnson.
Okay, right.
But I think everyone just wants him to come back. So anytime there's mystery person,
yes, steps up.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, it seems to be it's quite interesting because it seems to be focused on 3 different people. So it is all centered around the kind of the concept of the Arks of Omen, which we'll get to in due course. But the fact that it's revolving around 4 central characters does mean that I think we're going to get perhaps 4 different perspectives on roughly the same event.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's we all know that. Well, we're all guessing that 10th edition is next summer. So we need something to keep us going and keep the juices going for us narrative players. So yeah, I think it makes sense. We all know Angron's on the way. We've seen the pictures. We've gawped at the stats. So yeah, how this is all going to play out. I think for me, what I really like about this one is we do really get a sense of what Abaddon is thinking, and I think that's kind of a hint at what perhaps these other books will be. It's a real insight into their thoughts, their planning, machinations, what's going on. So yeah, a bit more personal rather than perhaps in the past where it's been a bit and then this battled and then that battled and then this battled. So yeah, I like it.
And it does also bring a new way to play in as well for fans of Kill Team who are perhaps a bit overwhelmed by the current state of 40k. It brings quite a cool way to play, which is boarding actions.
Yes. So I think for me, especially as the point size set for this is 500 points, or in Ashes currency, by the time you do your conversion, that's 25 power level, and that's our sweet spot, and that's where we live. We'll go through some of the more restrictions and possibilities later on, but it's fits really nicely for me, and I think there's other things that they've done with it that I would definitely hope to see it being played quite a lot at the club when it comes out, just as a really kind of a bit of a sorbet, a bit of a refresher from the normal super competitive games that they like to play there, because many of them go to competitions and events. So they're very much, looking to understand the latest book, how does that work and all that stuff. So yeah, I think there's loads of possibility with this.
Totally. And I think that's an interesting one you pointed there about sort of club games, is that especially if you are trying to play in an evening or something like that, then 500 points is perfect for that, like a small quick engagement, especially if you're going down to your local scout hut or whatever it is you're doing. Playing a full 2,000 point game or 1,750 point game of 40k, it can take quite a long time, especially after you consider setting up the tables if you have to, terrain and all that jazz. So to be able to do something that's still 40k, it's not Kill Team, and as we've discussed in the previous episode with Gary, that the Kill Team rules are very different. It isn't just small scale 40k; it's its own game with its own rule set on its own. Having boarding actions does provide you with a scope to be able to get that scratch that 40k itch whilst keeping within time constraints. That's cool.
Yeah, 100%.
So going, I suppose, into the main content of the narrative review of the book. Steve, do you want to kind of start us off with a broad overview?
Yeah. I mean, I think to start with, what I'd be keen to share with everyone is that, like, well over half the book is background and lore. So there's loads here for us to pull apart, loads for us to pick out some actions and some arcs, some ships that we want to do. But ultimately, it kicks off pretty much where we left off before. With the narrative books that we had, the Necromunda Gauntlet, and basically the fact that through there, Abaddon and his fleets have been smashing their way through, and have kind of come out the other side, and we really get to see how he has to constantly manage all the forces that he has. He's adamant that, you know, he is not a worshipper of the gods. He is just a leader of chaos. But he has to kind of keep everyone in balance.
I love how the more you describe it, you're describing less of the Warmaster of Chaos, you know, Abaddon, the Despoiler, and all that, and more a kind of slightly tired middle manager of a kind of, you know, I'm thinking like David Brent-esque or whatever the US equivalent of The Office is. You know, just like holding his hands to his temples and be like, oh, you rascals, why have you plagued me so?
I think for me, you know, as someone who is, you know, the ultimate warlord, the tyrant, and he does not have ultimate power. He has to balance it. And yeah, you're right. You know, he has probably got a spreadsheet somewhere, hasn't he, that he has to make sure everything's gonna to work out. Otherwise, people have to go and see HR.
I think Abaddon the Spoiler as Michael Scott from The Office or David Brent is probably like the peak kind of undermining of any narrative character that's ever happened, because he's this epic baddie and we've just like in one swift stroke we've ruined his credibility. What I do like about this book though is that it does give you more of an insight into Abaddon as a character. You know, he's kind of gone from this kind of like a bit of a joke, you know, like how many Black Crusades have you done? You know, all this stuff to actually he's being portrayed as this like real genuine threat to the galaxy, to the Imperium. And I like that. He's not this kind of like moustache twirling, dastardly evil baddie that constantly, you know, gets you know, like the Roadrunner. He's not like Wile E. Coyote having an anvil dropped on him or TNT like switching back to his feet or something. And there's a few little lines in there which I quite like. Abaddon says, when I strike at terror, it will be from a position of absolute strength. I will offer them neither battle nor siege. There will only be the fall of the headman's axe, certain, final, and singular. Which I think is cool, because the whole point he was making there was that Horus kind of potentially overstretched himself, overcommitted, went straight for terror, went straight for the throat, and ultimately was unsuccessful. And I think he likes to kind of see himself as, in the same way that you just said there, as not a puppet of the gods, also not kind of beholden to the failures of his father.
Yes.
Which I think is a really cool kind of like take on it. You know, the fact that he's like, you know, the arrogance of the Primarchs was, you know, was their failing and was ultimately Horus's failure and downfall. And he kind of is trying to distance himself from that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that quote you did, I mean, there is still this absolute belief that he is the man to get this done and it will happen. Even though, like I said, there's been so many Black Crusades that haven't quite made it. But yeah, and I think the inclusion of this new character, it's kind of like the way that he appears. It's very much like, you can imagine Abaddon going, "Oh, what now? What now have I got to go and sort out?" But even that,
I'm gonna have to create a new tab on my spreadsheet.
Exactly. but even then, he's very pragmatic in how he interacts with this guy. I mean, do you want to give us a description of kind of what we're looking at here? No, I mean, not just we've seen the model, but what do we know about this?
Yeah, so I suppose, but before I do, let's sort of set the context. The first few pages of the books has this this little in the same way that a lot of the 40k books has a kind of like a scene setting. And this is, written across a single page in this kind of really cool Gothic font down one column. And it says, the galaxy writhes like a wounded beast, tormented by the infected sores of countless warp storms. It laments in agony. While the forces of the Imperium Sanctus fight tooth and nail to regain control, the worlds of the Imperium Nihilus endure besiegement by nightmares uncounted. The forces of chaos attack on every front, from the Nakman Gauntlet to the Caradon sector. Alien races battle furiously for survival or rampage across the stars in orgies of conquest and destruction. Yet no one faction can truly gain mastery. Every victory and defeat only sees the inferno rage hotter. Abaddon the Despoiler has not laboured for thousands of years to see his long war end in mutual annihilation. His hands move unseen through the shadows on secret and diabolical missions. His legions of sorcerers and crypto-magi pore over every shred of arcane lore and prophetic utterance ever gathered, hunting for some esoteric advantage that will allow the Warmaster to seize decisive control of the conflict. Abaddon desires a secret weapon to unleash upon the Imperium of Man, and he will tear apart time and space if he must secure it. And for me, that's like, that just kind of brings this this whole kind of, the whole purpose of this book, the narrative of this book, it kind of like, that sets the scene. It's just like, he absolutely is aimed at terror, and he's absolutely down for whatever must happen in order to achieve that. So the fact that he ultimately is going to, I suppose, like come up with a bit of a, like an alliance with this demon, Vashtorr, the Arkifane, as he's known. I think that goes to kind of show his like pragmatism. That when Vashtorr does arrive on the scene, he is just about to like dismiss him and annihilate him, and he's kind of, and whatever it is, it says like, whatever twist of fate, stayed his finger on the trigger. He enters into this kind of uneasy alliance, and you do spend the book kind of thinking like, when's the dastardly twist? When's Vashtorr? Vashtorr is sold as this kind of very, again, I'm going to use the word pragmatic again, and actually quite like Abaddon. I'm not beholden to a single god. I don't want that, and he doesn't appear to be trying to trick Abaddon or like get him to enter into a bargain, that kind of thing. And you are sat there thinking like, oh yeah, this is it's not going to go well.
Yeah, because Abaddon tries to test Vashtorr and kind of sort of sense where's the treachery, where's it going to come from, and actually at every twist and turn he does what he says he's going to do, or he's truthful, and I think in some ways that kind of catches Abaddon out a little bit.
Yeah. If you can, catch out the Warmaster of Chaos, it certainly put him on the back foot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and but it still doesn't trust him at all.
No.
Let's be clear. He's not been beguiled, or he's it's like. So we should probably explain this thing that's mentioned right at the beginning, this weapon, this ultimate thing, because that ultimately is driving the narrative and driving these arcs and what's happening with them.
Yeah. What is the MacGuffin that they are chasing, Steve?
There we go. So our Vashtorr brings with him the knowledge of a collection of powerful artifacts and items that can be brought together to create this incredibly powerful weapon. We assume it's a weapon, this incredible powerful thing. And these, I call them items because it doesn't sound very sexy or very, because actually not all of them are, some of them are literally, sacred artifacts of the Imperium that are hidden in fortress planets, in vaults guarded by, huge swathes and thousands of guard. Some of them are, and yet some of them are literally buried in a ground in a hole somewhere. So we don't really know how Vashtorr knows this information, but he's basically offering this up as this is why I'm here, and he kind of needs the Chaos Fleet and the forces of Chaos to help achieve this. And this is kind of the bargain that he pulls together with Abaddon, and these treasures, these goals, are actually scattered all over the place.
So they're called key fragments, and that is the ultimate kind of the I suppose that's the quest. If you were to use a computer game term, that's the quest that the NPC Vashtorr has given your main character Abaddon.
Yes. And in the tavern.
In the tavern, absolutely. With Vashtorr appears with a big question mark over his head. But with combining all these key fragments that are scattered across the universe, Vashtorr and Abaddon can create, a kind of Imperium destroying weapon.
Yes, and part of Vashtorr's kind of proof of who he is he's been repairing and improving, first of all, the craft that he appears on, but also kind of shows that through his technomancy or his powers is that he's helping to create these arcs, these huge collections of broken wrecks and space hulks.
That's all they are at the first, isn't it? The Arks of Omen are just space hulks, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, they are just space hulks that are found within the warp, and then they're repurposed using Vashtorr's kind of crazy technoscience and a bit of the Black Legion and kind of the Warmaster's forces upgraded them, and they're basically then turned into kind of like almost like living weapons, And as you say, when Vashtorr first appears on the Vengeful Spirit, the flagship, that's how he's introduced, right? So Abaddon's just cruised around the Vengeful Spirit doing his thing, and suddenly like all the lights start flickering, all the temperature thermometers start saying it's cold or whatever, and all the computer screens start flashing, and all that usual stuff, usual kind of like witchy poo nonsense. You're thinking, oh no, something bad's happening. So he goes to investigate. There's all sorts of crazy like mechanicum-y things, dark mechanicum-y things happening, and Vashtorr appears, and he basically kind of is like, sup Abaddon, I'm here, I'm gonna be your bro. What does he say? He says, Abaddon the spoiler, I am Vashtorr the Arkifane, and I come to make you an offer, which is a pretty like bold claim, just to like manifest himself onto the Vengeful Spirit.
Yeah.
In front of Abaddon the spoiler, because it's a gamble, isn't it? But that's what I like about Vashtorr so far, is that he's got that kind of like cold, calculating energy that works for something that's like a dark mechanicum demon. He's ultimately an entity that thinks like a computer. He would have planned it meticulously, and you see a little bit of that plan in the kind of like flashback bit of narrative. And I like that. I think it's cool. It helps flesh out this character, and bearing in mind this is a character that I don't think we've ever heard of. We certainly the first I've heard of it. I don't think it's ever been mentioned before. Everyone's familiar with the dark mechanicum, but no one's heard of Vashtorr. And I think when you're introducing a new character like this, with a kind of like a brand new model, he's going to be the equivalent of an Abaddon the spoiler model for the range. Let's hope this is a whole new range of plastic mechanicum, dark mechanicum that's coming out. That's going to be super cool if that happens. But if you're going to introduce a character, you need something that people can get behind. And just having him as like, he's another bird-headed demon that speaks in riddles, or he's a slightly giggling fat thing that likes disease. And it's just kind of like, those are great tropes for those, those chaos gods, but you want something that's unique. So I don't know. I like what I've seen so far.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And I think the other really important thing that he brings is that through his construction powers, that each of these arcs also carries a warp portal with it. sometimes they're inside it, sometimes they're behind it, sometimes they're underneath it. I'm not sure the reasons for those, but they are really important because we find out that I think a lot of these space hulks are kind of thrown out, if you like, towards their target system, planet, moon, whatever it is. I don't necessarily see them being, highly maneuverable warships.
No, it's kind of like almost like a kamikaze suicide mission, isn't it?
Very much so. Very much so. And even down to, often the plan is it's kind of Cincinnati Shuffle, where they'll send in a load of troops from the Space Hulk. They'll be fighting on the surface when really the main assault is actually happening deep inside the vault. And actually all the forces will die. They'll be overrun. The most important thing is you grab the key artifact, you get back to the portal, and as far as that's job done.
Yeah.
Don't need to about getting anyone back. Don't need to about getting the ship back, the Ark back. As long as you get the artifact, job done.
Totally. And actually, for the second time in I think, well, less the last episode, but the episode before, I'm going to mention Rogue One. It's got a Rogue One-esque vibe of like, as long as you stick this USB stick into the satellite dish and upload the data for the Death Star, then and it doesn't matter that the mission fails, right? Or everyone dies because the mission hasn't failed. And I think that kind of goes back to what we said about earlier about like Abaddon is willing to tear apart time and space if he's going to secure it. That the Arkifane has promised him this weapon that he's calling the Key, and all these key fragments need to be collected. And the more key fragments that they have, the better the chances are that they're going to get this weapon, the key, up and running or whatever it is. So Abaddon kind of often uses like his kind of sneaky ways, and he helps brings in the Alpha Legion into it, which I quite liked. There's a great little flavor text here of lastly and most insidiously. The Despoiler made a secret pact with a number of Alpha Legion operatives who then infiltrated almost every Bale fleet. And a Bale fleet is basically, they send an Ark of Omen and a whole bunch of like normal Chaos ships kind of follow it. It would be their task to ensure that key fragment acquisition occurred, even should everything else go awry. What reward the Alpha Legionnaires were promised for their services remained between them and Abaddon. So ultimately, Abaddon is using these kind of repurposed space hulks called Arks of Omen, launch them into sectors where they know the key fragments exist and securing them. And he's kind of used the promise of glory and the promise of greatness and all that jazz, and indeed command of a Bale fleet as like justification to get all these various different renegades and warbands kind of united under his banner. Because like going back to what you were saying earlier, like it's not a unified effort. Abaddon isn't sat there as the head of a very disciplined force. Sure, he's got his inner circle, and you've got all the Black Legion and their kind of like their various different factions. But even within them, there's kind of like warring factions. But then you've then got all the kind of countless smaller bands of renegades and heretics that are kind of vaguely aligned to. I guess they're all chaotic aligned. They're all chaos aligned, but they're not necessarily all aligned to exactly what Abaddon wants. But he doesn't care. He's like, cool, like you can even pretend to be into this and just like go off and do your own thing. But to Abaddon, he doesn't care, because as long as he gets the key fragments, then that's he's topping up that quest completion percentage rate above the question mark.
Exactly. Get that pie chart looking better on his spreadsheet.
Oh yeah, on the spreadsheet. Yeah, he's got his new tab. It's the Arkifane /key tab, and it's just topping up that spreadsheet.
Interestingly, though, that there's kind of a hint that the Arkifane says that it doesn't necessarily need every single one, but it just needs enough.
Yes.
So you kind of wonder if you don't have enough, but you try and jury rig it, could it blow up? Oh, I don't know. It's just hinting at something there. So again, I think it's just little story seeds that are being left here for us to discover. And yeah, we've got 3 other books to do that in. So I don't imagine we're going to get everything nailed straight away.
No, there are some I do like we do like a little story narrative seed, don't we? There's a good one here, which is talking about the Bale fleets. And as I said, the Bale fleets is a term used to describe, I suppose, the overall force, which is the Ark of Omen gets launched out of the warp into real space, and then accompanied by all the various hangers on of the Chaos fleet. It's interesting that it says that the Arks of Omen themselves almost act as like a bit of a beacon in the warp, which allows all the Chaos ships to kind of follow them through the warp and into real space, which I thought was quite cool. But so here you go. So no two Bale fleets were the same in composition, instead being made up of whichever champions and warbands had rallied to the banner of a particular Ark's master. Some of those followers were loyal, whether due to blood oaths, bonds of faith, or simply out of fear. Others cast avaricious eyes upon the Arks and fought in the shadows only in the hopes of seizing command for themselves. So again, that kind of backstabby chaos. It reminds me of the Skaven, I suppose, in Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar. But yeah, go back to that point of Abaddon doesn't care that they're fighting amongst themselves, because the whole point is essentially maybe being a bit of a distraction to get the key artifact, the key fragment. So, for example, the Ogre, for instance, an Ark of Omen, the Ogre, for instance, was captained by Lord Golthorg the Blighted and garrisoned by his Nurgle-worshipping renegade chapter, the Sons of Rot. Sailing alongside the Ogre were the ships of the traitorous Morbidax regiments, the traitorous Morbidax regiments, the gruesome renegade knights of House Nor, Archmagos Ovlot's Vivisector squadrons. Archmagos Vivisector squadrons. I mean, I don't even know what that is. That sounds horrible. And the vessels of the Plague Crows and Vermin Guard renegade warbands. The latter two forces were long-time rivals, each of whose champions only offered allegiance to Lord Golthorg, so as to avoid their sworn enemies being the ones to gain his sole favour. By comparison, Iron Warrior's warsmith Zagra, or Zagra, not sure that C's silent, Zagra's formed a fleet around his Ark Herald of Misery, consisting entirely of subservient Iron Warriors warbands, Oathsworn Titan legios, and enslaved mortal cults. United by Legion loyalty and fear of reprisals, these forces followed Zagra's commands unquestionably and made his Bale fleet one of the most lethally efficient in the first wave. So what I like about that, apart from just kind of it being a cool story, is that it provides you as a player, if you are Chaos aligned, to have a huge amount of scope for modeling potential or creating your own narrative. If you're a Thousand Suns player, but you're thinking, I'd quite like to kind of expand a little bit and maybe build instead of just doing a pure Thousand Suns force, maybe add some cool like Death Guard models. You can do that. You can be like, right, cool. So this Ark of Omen, this Bale fleet consists of a portion of Death Guard models and some Chaos cultists that look more normal rather than like being like Zeechy cultists. And you can add in a couple of Death Guard and then just run it as like Chaos Space Marines. Or if you do want to go pure kind of like, I really want to have this, like maybe you want to do a Herald of Misery Bale fleet force and just have an Iron Warriors warband, that's cool. But again, it allows you to be like, cool, I'm not just going to have Iron Warriors. I'm going to have Iron Warriors and some Renegade Guard who are all techie. Maybe you're going to use like Necromunda models, something like the Enforcers could look quite techie. Maybe you're going to use like Skitarii with some conversions and run them as like Renegade Guard, whatever. Like it allows you to just kind of buy into that narrative with a really cool thematic force, and it's a thematic force that fits the existing narrative rather than being like, I really want to get involved in this Ark of Omen nonsense, but my force doesn't fit.
Yeah. I think there is so many of these little snippets and side stories that kind of, I'll say give you permission, but give you the opportunity to say, my force has got a place. There's a great one here, a little box out. We all enjoy a box out on this show, but it's called the Diamond Talon.
Oh, I've literally got that up in front of me. That's so good. That is so good, that one.
The Arks of Omen were still space hulks for all their adaptations, so still sources both danger and potential archaeotech riches. Many renegade bands given charge of the vessels continue to fight battles against monstrous denizens within their own flagships and explore the inner depths, hoping to unearth powerful arcana. Nor were they alone in this. like parasites feeding on ocean-going leviathans, forces of raiders from many races risk slipping aboard the Arks by cunning or stealth in search of riches. One such boarding party were the Eldari corsairs of the Diamond Talon, whose raid upon the Ark Devourer of Hope was so successful that they found themselves within a chance to strike at its command centre and cripple the vessel. Envisaging the carnage and disruption the Ark would cause amidst local Imperial Navy patrols, the Eldari pirates instead withdrew and left the renegades to their bloodshed, certain they would be able to capitalise upon it. So that's just so cool. Let's play that fight, let's game that fight out, and wait until you get to the bridge and then decide what you're going to do. I think, yeah. So there's lots of these in this book, and they're all inspirational for how you can bring your force. And I think this whole idea that it's 25 power level, 500 points, everybody will have some models somewhere to play. And also it might be something, there's that force that you've just started, or there's that thing you never finished, and actually I'd like to get them out and play with them because they would be cool in this setting, but they're not necessarily efficient for match play or whatever it is. So yeah, I'm expecting to see some dusty models trampsing through the corridors.
I'm certainly the force I've chosen, which we'll get to in a second, is actually an abandoned project for exactly that reason. Although, so I'm just going to touch on that Diamond Talon little snippet there. I think for me that single kind of snip out, breakout box, whatever we're going to call it, it's just proof that it provides you as a player whatever scope for whatever army you want. Because so there's two aspects of that. Of not only does it say that the Arks of Omen are still space hulks, and so sources of both danger and potential archaeotech riches. So both within the space hulks, you could have like a random little Tyrannid infestation. You could have any number of races could have got lost in the warp and then found themselves in a kind of like compartmented area of this space hulk. And these Arks of Omen, they're not like fully cleared. They're not like completely won over. Basically, the Chaos Forces kind of defeat whatever enemies are inside, whether demonic or otherwise, enough to take control of the space hulk.
Yes.
And then launch it into real space. Kind of like 50% of it could be like completely overrun with Gene Stealers, but they don't care because as long as they've like closed the doors and locked it behind them, they just leave that section of the space hulk be. So that allows you as a player to be like, cool, well, what could exist? Maybe like a team of like Leagues of Votan see the space hulk and try and launch themselves into it to get into the archaeotech riches. Or maybe there's some Tyranids in there, as I said, or maybe there's like a lost Astra Militarum detachment that just kind of went missing in the warp and never appeared. Maybe they're still, maybe their ship is like docked onto this space hulk as well. And then the kind of the forces of raiders, the forces of raiders, who may or may not have radar themselves. The forces of raiders, you could have like an Orc commando force. You could have any like version of Eldari. You could have like a Tau Pathfinder force, all these kind of things. Just something that could exist that could interact with the Arks of Omen. And that's why I like that one so much, is not only is it a cool story, but also, as you say, it gives you permission to say, like, yeah, why is this kind of Chaos versus Imperium thing? Why does that involve your Tau force? Why does that involve your Tyranid force?
Yeah. And even down to actually how the story pans out, because it's not straight away that the Imperium kind of clock what's going on here, because many of these Bell fleets are going to sort of random places. It takes a little while for them to clock that actually they are going to predetermined locations, and then they start to go, well, what's there? What don't we know? So I think even down to having a game where there's a small group of Primaris or a small group of Inquisition that are trying to sneak aboard, that are trying to get to the command center to try and understand, is there anything here? It doesn't have to be a full-on assault of elite Terminators from whatever chapter, it can be a bit sneaky. It can be so. Yeah, I think for me the setup for the games is super solid.
What an excellent segue, talking of games, into boarding actions.
Yes.
So in boarding actions, there are it's, as Steve said, it's 500-point games set in the essentially set in the terrain that came out with the new season of Kill Team. There are a number of tweaks. So first of all, there's a number of kind of rules tweaks. So there's things like setting Overwatch. So people who have played various previous games of 40k or Space Hulk or New Kill Team will be familiar with Overwatch. You can get things to shoot things out of their turn. There's things like operating hatchway, like opening doors and things like that. That all exists.
Sorry, just to interrupt. That opening hatchway is a funny one, because if somebody's on the other side, it's a bit of a strength test to see who can open the door.
Yes. Because it could.
So just imagine some poor little guardsman manages to roll great, and some hunking great gene stealer on the other side fails. It's just like, so right, lads, I've got this.
Yeah, I do like that. I think it's cool that it's there's ways of using this terrain that was originally designed for Kill Team in 40k. Although I do have a point on that later, perhaps. So going back to the rules, there's stratagems, specific stratagems for boarding actions. But interestingly, in boarding actions, you can't use any other stratagems apart from those with the boarding action label. So you strip out all the normal 40k stratagems, and you can only use boarding action stratagems, which is crazy. And there's 3 in this book.
Yeah, super streamlined.
And again, there's you can't use any warlord traits or relics. Instead, when you select a boarding patrol, which is the detachment that you use in boarding actions, your warlord can be given a single boarding action enhancement from the list below. Named characters cannot be given a boarding action enhancement. So again, what are the things that we have spoken about being potentially frustrating about current state of 9th edition? It is the rules bloat of stratagems and all these various different enhancements. Not only is this game smaller in points and is quicker, but also it's more streamlined and there's less rules bloat because it's cut out some of that stuff. It also allows you to think of different things, because you might be thinking, oh right, so this X unit in Astra Militarum is absolutely broken because of this really cool stratagem. I'm going to take it in match play games because it's amazing. Suddenly, you don't have access to the stratagem, so that unit might suddenly be not as if you are very competitively focused, it might not be as appealing, and it might make you look at other units in a new light.
Yeah, there'll be strong and powerful units under this rule set, under this meta, if you want to call it that. So one of the real caps on things is like the patrol detachment is literally 0 to 1 HQ, 0 to 3 troops, and 0 to 3 elites. So that's pretty flexible there. But there's also caps on unit sizes as well, aren't there, Don?
Yeah, there are. And you can't use certain types as well. So, and even not only that, you can't even take the same elite unit twice.
Yes.
So you can't have monsters, vehicles, jump pack, cavalry, biker, fly, and you can only include one character.
Yeah.
So that's quite restrictive. That is very restrictive. But it also, I think that will make for some really cool kind of thematic, like battle force style armies. The kind of thing that if it, I heard someone say recently, like if it looks like an army, it's probably not very good. And but actually, it was a match play player talking about Age of Sigmar. But I think that's quite interesting, because I think sometimes you do see very tournament match play focused armies, and they don't look and feel like the kind of army you would see on a spread of a White Dwarf, that kind of thing. They look very much like it is this unit, min-maxed or whatever. So I feel like this boarding patrol detachment creates the space to see armies that do look a little bit more thematic, I suppose.
I think it's like seems to be. I've not had a chance to play it yet, but it seems to be a careful set of curbs on rules here. I mean, another one is unit size as well, in that if your unit comes size is less than 5, then you have to keep at your minimum size. If your unit size is between 5 and 10, you can have it at 10. But if a unit is a starting strength of 10 or more models, you can't use them. So there won't be lots of hordes running about. So again, I definitely see that being a way of breaking the game, because things like the way line of sight works, the way you can't charge anything you can't see, how you get to shoot and fight, it's going to be fast, brutal, impactful, but that's a boarding action, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what you want. That kind of vibe. So, talking of fast, brutal, what army did you make? So I assume you've gone for a 25 power like me. You slightly mugged off the 500 point thing because it was quite difficult to add the points together.
Numbers get quite high for me, so
yeah. As soon as you start going over, 25 is okay because I can take my socks off and get to 20 and then count the last 5 in my head. Like that's about as far as I can go.
So actually, what I've gone for is, and the weirdest thing is that it ends up at 24 power level, is Ben, my son, and I have been doing a tale of 2 wargamers, where in fact we've nicked this idea from Mitzi and Ben when they were doing it during lockdown, in that we buy a box of models each month for the other person, and the idea is that you give them something they wouldn't normally do. So this isn't designed to be 2,000 point army. It's literally a fun painting project. So Ben bought for me something I wouldn't have necessarily picked, but what I've really been enjoying is reading the Black Library book and getting to know them a bit more, is some Black Templar.
Ooh.
Mainly he's picked me things which are punchy, because I don't normally... I'm a bit more shooty, and to be honest, it's a bit refreshing after obviously being a lot of work with my guard and stuff. So what I have for, and again, it just works out nicely in that it's 1 troop, 1 HQ and 1 elite at the moment. So we've got Chaplain Grimaldus, and obviously he's got his lackeys with him carrying the goodies. So what I'm really hoping is that it doesn't turn out that one of those happens to be a key fragment, but we will find out probably in another book. I've got the Primaris Crusader squad, and then I've got Sword Brethren. So a few guns, and then some hitty sticks, and then some absolute tanks to hold that corridor off. So, yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things. It's like, well, that's what I've got. Let's see what it adds up to. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to bring them out. I think there's a few more units coming for January, February, but right now I've got those. The Sword Brethren only arrived for this week, so they need painting. The others are 80% painted. So yeah, I should be good for the new year and playing with those.
Awesome.
What about you, Dan?
So I also went for Astartes. Mine were slightly more plague flavored than crusade flavored, though. So I do like Death Guard. I love the model range. It's an amazing model range, 40k. It's an army that I've kind of bought a bunch of before and then kind of never got around to it and sold it on. Hilariously, I did also buy the Christmas box set with Mortarion and a whole bunch of Death Guard in it, just because I thought, oh yeah, well maybe I'll buy the box set, and Mortarion's just such a good model. So I kind of bought that, and I've put that in my kind of like hobby cupboard for now, thinking I'll hold off opening it all up first in case, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this 25 power force. And then consider maybe expanding out into 40k. And if I don't, I can always stick the box on eBay. So I decided to build a little Death Guard force to kind of start me off. So I went for a Malignant Plague Caster as my warlord, because I thought it would be cool to use psychic powers. Often some of the issues you can have with psychic powers is that it's quite tough to get your psyker within range to do like a cool witchfire or maybe they're just on their own. They can get like shot off the board by something powerful at the other end of the board. I thought this way you can have it's nice, close up, personal, brutal, can start setting things on witchy poo fire with my playcaster.
Yes.
And then I just kind of went for it was like a little a pick a mix box of Plague Marines and or Death Guard units. So I went for a unit of Plague Marines.
Yep.
I went for a unit of cultists.
Yeah.
A unit of Poxwalkers and a unit of Terminators, Blight Lord Terminators. So
there's plenty of bodies.
Yeah, it's quite, and it is 25 power, but that's for 4 power, between the 4 power of the Poxwalkers and the cultists, you get 20 bodies. I do wonder whether it's too many bodies for potentially quite cramped spaces. So I could always tweak it, but I kind of, what I wanted was I had in my mind of like the this kind of like wave attack kind of thing of like that they might first seed the and actually what I was thinking of, I wasn't actually thinking of the kind of the Arks of Omen, like the assaults of the on the planets. Clearly I was thinking about the boarding actions themselves. So in my mind, this is kind of potentially pre Ark of Omen heading off. This is them clearing out the Space Hulk and getting it ready. So the first they send in the Poxwalkers to kind of like trigger any traps or find out where the enemy are. And these are just like the shambling zombies, right? Then they send in the cultists. So I thought that would be a cool way to kind of maybe use some of the Renegade Guard models from Blackstone Fortress, but kind of nurgle them up a little bit, put loads of rust on their weapons, that kind of thing. And then they send in the Plague Marines. And then if there's anything massive, they can then send in the Blight Lord Terminators. So it's a kind of like sequential kind of wave vibe that I was going for.
Love it. Because actually one of the enhancements is a personal teleporter. So you could definitely use that on the Terminators, because it's this ability says when the bearer arrives from strategic reserves, you can set it up wholly within your own entry zones or anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 away from enemy models. So yeah, I love it, Dan. And I think for me, I've played a couple of games with kind of narrow corridors and it really does change how units perform. And I really like the idea of maybe my sword brethren trying to hack through all of the Poxwalkers. And it's not that I'm going to take much damage, but it gives you the time to get into position, or it gets time for you to get to the furnace or the control room, and it's absolute valid tactic for that. So I think there's actually probably quite a lot of really interesting lists out there.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think, though, just to sort of double check, I don't think the Malignant Plaguecaster can arrive from strategic reserves. I don't think he has like Terminator armor for a teleporter.
Okay.
And the boarding action enhancements that you're referring to are given to the Warlord, not a unit. So I wouldn't be able to give them to my Terminators.
Right.
That would be something bad.
Yes.
And however, I could, potentially take a unit like an HQ that could deploy from strategic reserves. I'd have to refer to my codex to double check whether like something like the Lord of Contagion has it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Like that would be cool. Imagine like having your forces held up by a bunch of Poxwalkers only to find like the Lord of Contagion, or maybe whatever it is, like from coming up from behind, like teleporting. That'd be cool. Yeah.
So we've got our forces. What are the missions about, Dan?
Well, so the missions, and I suppose this is probably where like my kind of main criticism comes from. The missions look cool. There's all these, there's objective marker missions, and the missions themselves seem cool. My frustration is that this rule set has clearly been designed to be used with the kill team kind of terrain, the Space Hulk type terrain that they've brought out. But there already exists a kind of corridor battle terrain within Games Workshop's product line in the Zone Mortalis for Necromunda. So, and again, like I think I mentioned this last episode, so sorry listeners to whinge about this again. It's like, as someone that owns quite a lot of Zone Mortalis terrain, it's a bit frustrating that there's this whole new rule set where the missions are very prescribed about how the terrain's laid out. It isn't like I don't know, like
so each component in the set is given a code like A4, B3, whatever, and they are literally, this component here within this space. It's not like a sort of typical deployment plan where there's like a vague box of a house somewhere in that quarter of the table.
Yeah, and it's like, put a door here on this side of the wall. And it's very prescribed. I suppose, like, okay, fine, I am whinging. It's a little bit, but actually, like, what does it allow you to do? It allows other players to pick up the book, pick up a box. They're obviously going to release this terrain. I think they've even said it on Warhammer Community, but they're obviously going to release this terrain as a standalone set. It allows people to just kind of know exactly where they're going and what they're doing. And I'm sure that they will have tested these missions so that they are kind of balanced. What does it mean for me? As like, am I going to rebuy a whole bunch of very similar-ish corridor terrain? No, absolutely not. However, what I could do quite easily is just rehash the missions for Zone Mortalis. Just kind of make it up. Given that we're, like, the way we play, very narrative focused, we're not going to be like going to a boarding action match play tournament where the positioning is absolutely spot on. So it doesn't really matter. I suppose, like, it just knocked me off a little bit.
I think for me, we've been spoiled in that so much of the scenery that we get from GW does kind of line up, and pipes and hoses connect, and this is the same height as that. So yeah, you just kind of expect it to be, everything seems to be much more interchangeable. So it would you'd kind of hope that it could be. I mean, I agree with you. I think if these games have been tested and the positions of the doors are important to achieve the missions, then if somebody's definitely looking for that, then yes, buying the scenery box set will allow you to do that. I think if you're a reasonably experienced player and a narrative player as well, you can infer the mission and build something that's going to suit. So, for example, I'm just going to pick one at random here. So I've got the furnace. So the mission briefing is: a vital target has been located with an area converted into a deadly blast furnace. Perhaps the enemy are attempting to cleanse what they deem to be a heretical artifact, or which slated for ritual execution. Maybe this area has been booby-trapped against borders or a vital database. Maybe you just simply have dropped in by an officer who was already slain within the furnace grisly confines. Whatever the case, victory will go to those with the nerve to brave the flames and the fortitude to endure them. So it's got some special rules for being inside the furnace. So I think, it appears to be that a good portion, maybe a third of the table, is the furnace, and then you fight and go inside that, and hopefully you can collect what you need to do. So I think I do agree with you. I think it's a shame that we've got so prescriptive, but I think you'll be able to make some cool scenery. I'll be able to make some cool scenery. And plus, there's all the other games that we can make up ourselves, using the background that we've got and the box outs that we've got.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I think, like, yeah, I'm not gonna whinge about it too much, clearly, because the whole this hasn't like taken the shine off the release for me. I think it's more of just a personal gripe, like, oh, for goodness sake, if I want to play. And I think for me, like, wargamers, we are sticklers for rules. So I think there is a little part of me that's like, oh, well, I don't want to do it wrong. I've got this terrain, but it's the wrong terrain. It's not the right terrain, and it's like it just kind of goes a little bit against kind of like my slightly, like, I don't know, particular way, which I think a lot of wargamers are a bit like that. They're like, well, the rules say this, so it has to be like that. I'm like, well, I don't have A3 and A5. I've only got A4 and so yeah. Never mind. But overall.
One of the conversations I've had with Ben is that the size of these ships, they're hundreds of miles long. They're made up of all sorts of vessels, some of which have probably got chapels in it that are a mile wide. So, there's no reason why it all has to be Space Hulk, corridor corridor room kind of thing. It could be, we're looking to build something that's perhaps like a shuttle bay. So still lots of line of sight blocking with containers and all that sort of stuff. So you get a sense of the game. It's not just one big open space shooting at each other from one side to the other, but it doesn't have to be exactly like this to be fighting within an arc.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you know what? I think that's a great point, Steve. You could theoretically play on a normal. You could use the kind of like the concept of the rules. There's a forbidden area, that is a furnace. Things can happen. There are some rules that go along with it. Much like all the Flashpoint rules, you could go underwater, you could do this, blah, blah, you could go into the snowstorm. Yeah. You could use that concept and apply it to a normal 40k battlefield. Maybe add a bit more terrain and just be like, we're going to play a 500-point battlefield, a 500-point game on this quite densely terrained 40k battlefield, because this is just like the cathedral area. So I'm going to use all my city fight terrain. People are like, oh, that doesn't look like a space Hulk. It's like, well, what does a space Hulk look like? The whole point. We've harked on about how the Space Hulk thing means you could be flexible with how you play and use any race, any faction, whatever. For the same reason, you could absolutely do like an orc junk town. Be like, yeah, cool. Just pretend there's like a low ceiling. This is an orc junk town within a Space Hulk. This is an orc rock or something.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, I'm convinced, Steve. I'm convinced. Well done. Well done. You've convinced me. I take my grumpiness back.
It's valid, but there's lots of ways of approaching this. But yeah, I missed opportunity, but I think overall for me, this is a super solid book, and between a new way to play and lots of little story seeds, it's something I want to dive into.
Fair. And talking of terrain, friend of the show, Gary, from Dark Fantastic Mills, is releasing a whole bunch of Chaos terrain at the moment, isn't he?
Yes, so it depends when you're listening to this, but as of 17th of January, on Kickstarter, Dark Fantastic Mills are releasing Chaos Citadel. So this is a kind of generic system, if you like. So it would be good for fantasy, be good for Lord of the Rings, certainly be good for any chaos forces in the 40k world. And there's going to be a whole mix of stuff. It's going to kick off with a core set, which is your battlements. So again, we've got plenty of rules to manage that. It will then go into a bastion. And again, we just need to add some guns to that and you're good to go for 40k. And hopefully, if it can reach the levels of funding that we're all hoping, there's going to be a fighting pit.
Ooh.
So again, just perfect. And I think, with a little bit of Jukari would have a nice fighting pit in there. It depends how you paint it. So,
it would work well for the upcoming World Eaters release as well. I bet their Space Hulk would definitely have a gladiatorial ring.
Yeah, 100%. So what's going to be on sale is going to be STL files. So this is the first time Dark Fantastic have done this. Typically, they will sell you the physical model, but they're trialing selling these. So if you look out on Kickstarter for Chaos Citadel, they will be kicking off on the 17th, and it'd be exciting to see how it goes. Wish Gary luck.
We'll, absolutely. Gary does some cool terrain. My favorite is the Rotten Cap Mushroom and Doom Cap Mushroom sets. So he has the sort of Doom Cap Deeps, which works really well for kind of Night Goblins or Moonclan Grots, that kind of vibe. But equally, that could also work quite well for a kind of like Death World, whether it's Catachans or Tyranids or something like that. That could work really well. When Gary's Kickstarter launches, we will update the description on all the various different things with the link, and we'll also tweet it from and Instagram it and all that usual jazz. So yeah, check that out. By all means, even if you're not going to get the actual files themselves, by all means, you check out it and back it for $1 or £1 or whatever, just to kind of support it, because it's a cool terrain set. And if you do go for it and you do play some games in it, by all means, send them in to us and we can have a look at it, talk about it, and stick it up on the social medias.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Right. Steve, I shall leave you to your Black Templars assembly, and I shall go and start tinkering with some Death Guard.
Absolutely.
And if you want to check out some of our hobby progress, whether it's Black Templars, Death Guard, or anything like that, you can find us on @AOTI40k on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, We've also launched a YouTube channel as well, which we're starting to upload some of our podcasts to. Just audio at the moment, potentially some video content in the future. And you can get hold of me at DangerMouse425 on Twitter. And Steve, you are Tin Racer Steve on Twitter, are you not?
I am.
Wonderful. In that case, keep calm and crusade on.
Cheers, guys.